Welcome to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden. Glad you could join me for, well, all the usual reasons plus one more. It's going to be a tough podcast for a lot of reasons. I'll get into that in a moment. But in the meanwhile, I hope your season is going well. I'm still fighting a little bit of a bug. Caught it, one of the many souvenirs from that FurFeathersFriends trip to South Dakota. Thank you, everybody who attended, by the way. Had folks from 6 or 7 states, multi-generational, and already talking about doing it again next year. Of course, FurFeathersFriends is, well, it's actually closely related to what I'm going to be talking about with our guest this week. You'll find out more as we get deeper into it. What you doing these days? Everybody's deep into the hunting season, seeing lots of great tailgate photos, and I'm so happy that you share them with me. Some of the lessons you learned, we'll talk about those down the pike in this Upland Nation podcast as well. And here, getting geared up for our next Northern Nevada adventure coming up next week. Hopefully the weather cooperates. We'll see. The Upland Nation podcast is brought to you in part by Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, Pointer Shotguns, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, True Lock Choke Tubes, and FurFeathersFriends.com. Well, the weather here sucks and reminds me of all the reasons I like to go south in the wintertime whenever I can. If you're already looking at kind of the end of the season and how you might be able to extend it, did a piece a few years back on just that topic. And let me share some of the places that have late seasons, I guess late in the calendar for what it's worth. Take a look at some of these states if you're looking for a sunbird, snowbird destination. Arizona and New Mexico will let you chase birds until mid-February. Texas, if you can find some ground out there, till the 25th of February. Georgia and Alabama, generally in the same region, about the end of February for all of those places. Check the regulations. It changes every year, but that's generally a good guideline for you. Heck, in South Carolina, if you can find somewhere to chase bobwhites, you can do it until the first day in March most years. So there's your advice for this year. Maybe it's just aspirational, or maybe you can get down there for some reason. I wish I could. I'll be heading south, but not quite that far south toward the end of the season. Taking my shotguns and my non-toxic shot. So guess where I'm going? Yeah, California. Can't go quite as late as those places, but at least I'll be down there thawing out, if nothing else. This first part of the show is brought to you by Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School. If you are like me, you're kind of reaching into one of your vest pockets wondering where your glasses went, or something else just as critical. Well, they've got a pro shop on their website, midvalleyclays.com, that can restock all of the stuff you've lost, worn out, or never had to begin with. From gun cases, gun sleeves, to range bags, gun cleaning supplies, you name it, they've got it, and it's all in stock and ready to go. Midvalleyclays.com is where you find that stuff. Yeah, like I said, it's going to be tough. My friend Tom McIntyre and we don't get together near as much as we should, and unfortunately we won't be able to do it anymore. Yes, this will be the final Tom McIntyre interview you ever hear anywhere. Tom, well, how do I start? I got to know him when I was doing Field and Stream radio. He kind of took me under his wing. The guy is a renowned author. He writes for all the big magazines. He's written more than a half dozen books on various topics, most of them Africa and big game, or exotic game in other parts of the world, for lack of a better term. I considered Tom the best living hunting writer in the country. And unfortunately, 2 days after I interviewed him, Tom passed away. It was tough on all of us. The news is still making the rounds out there. I stopped by on my way to South Dakota, enjoyed the hell out of the interview, and so did he. His wife, Elaine, shared with me how much he really enjoyed just getting back to talking about the stuff he loves to talk about, including his new book, Thunder Without Rain. It'll still come out in February of 2023, and that was the premise for the interview. But we covered a lot of ground, and I am so grateful. Now, here's the lesson in all of this, and I know I'm trying to paint a positive picture here. We've lost Tom McIntyre, and I cannot say enough about that. Go back, find his books, reread them, or read them for the first time. Here's the lesson in all of this, though, and it started years ago, and it reminded me again, and I'm so grateful I stopped and shared in Wyoming on the way. Life is short. Your friends are a finite resource. Someday they're not going to be there for you, and vice versa. Don't want to get morbid about it, but you know what I'm talking about. When you have the chance, and even if it means a detour to Sheridan, Wyoming, stop and see the people who are important to you. Reach out, enjoy their company. Ideally, go hunting with them. The lesson is clear. We all have a limited tenure on this earth. Take advantage of the wonderful things you get out of a gathering with friends and family. Okay, enough about that. Let's get to the interview. I'm so lucky to be back here. I'm in Sheridan, Wyoming with a friend of mine, Tom McIntyre. I'll tell you all about that story in a moment. Tom is, as I've said before, one of the greatest living hunting writers. If you haven't got any of his books, start with the one I like the most, which is The Snow Leopard's Tale. But there are so many out there. Days of Field is a book. The Way of the Hunter. Dreaming the Lion is another great one. And we're here to talk about his new book, and that's the one I'm looking forward to reading when it finally comes out. I've kind of sampled it. But Tom McIntyre, welcome to the Upland Nation podcast.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You know, the last time we talked on mic, it was for Field and Stream Radio back in the day.
Yeah, don't remind me. I mean, it's just that would be a whole show. The pen and ink.
Oh gosh.
Outdoor press.
Yeah, which if you haven't heard, by the way, if you're living under a rock, there is no such thing as a magazine called Field and Stream anymore, or Outdoor Life, and we both missed most of that. We made a few bucks on those guys, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, but we missed the golden age of guys like O'Connor and
we did. But
I'd open up Field and Stream and there'd be Warren Page in Tanzania for a month.
And you know, we'll talk a lot about that and how it influenced you, but I remember some of the guys from way back who influenced me a lot. One who you probably worked with in one way or another was Duncan Barnes. Remember Duncan?
Yeah, I remember Duncan, yeah.
That guy taught me one thing about journalism that has stuck with me ever since, and it's been an overarching value in everything I've done since, and that is whatever else you do, you better serve the reader.
That's always been my theory. I mean, to me, it's there's too many people want to serve themselves when they write.
Yeah.
And that is, and I get frustrated, because I hear these reviews, and it is, it's the same thing. It's me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And usually poor, pitiful me.
Yes.
And I just, in my mind, that's not what I'm here for.
No, it isn't. And you would know, you have written, I don't even want to know how many articles for everybody from Men's Journal to Field and Stream to Outdoor Life, English magazines.
I've written for German magazines.
Achtung.
Yeah, Jaeger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, those are markets I ought to develop.
Well, there's the bird hunting culture there is pretty extensive.
Oh yeah,
but very ritualized.
Absolutely.
There are rough shooters.
There are. But I had a hunt test, an American who's a German hunt test judge on the podcast a few weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
Learned way more about that than I ever knew, but I understood a little bit. With a name like Linden, you'd think I know a little bit about German hunting.
Unter den Linden.
Yes. In fact, someday I have to make a pilgrimage to Berlin just for that reason.
Show Berlin with your name.
Show everybody the sign.
Yeah.
But, Tom, you've written for everybody, and that's just the beginning. Why don't you give me a little bit of backstory? How do you end up writing hunting stories?
Yeah,
Reed College graduate. Los Angeles.
No. Let me disabuse you.
Wait, you got kicked
not a
out?
graduate. No. I count myself among the true Reedy.
Yeah.
Is Steve Jobs who left.
Yeah.
Ry Cooter who left.
Okay.
I think Kesey may have passed through and kept going.
Yeah, he did. Stopped in Eugene and never left. I know. By the way, he's a great partier. I'll tell you from personal experience.
Okay. Well, that's right. You come from that neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was counterintuitive. I guess. Or what's the phrase of the cognitive dissonance or something?
Yeah, we both suffer that.
My father was not a hunter, and he shot. He'd go bird hunting, but his best friend was just an avid hunter.
Yeah.
And this was in Downey, California, which is, as suburban as you can get.
Yeah. You lived on the other side of downtown from my.
It's sort of Baja Orange County or upper Alta Orange County.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I remember I was like 4 years old, and if you go around the corner, the house here, you can look up, you can see this red buffalo.
Yeah.
That was his.
Okay.
And he killed that in 1956.
Yeah.
If we may use the word killed.
Yeah.
And I was 4 years old. And I walked into his house, and there was this thing on the wall that I'd never seen anywhere in anybody's house. And it struck something. And I knew at that point I really wanted, hunting? Yeah, I want to do this. And I sort of latched onto him. And he had daughters, so he didn't have a son. And he was, very patient and, lots of things I could have, well, we won't go into it. I won't get on the couch with you, Dr. Freud.
Yeah.
But he was just a great guy, and he taught me all this stuff. And he had gone to Africa, and he wasn't wealthy. He was a working class guy. He was a white collar worker. And first time I went to Africa, he sold his wife's insurance policy.
Oh my!
He cashed it in.
Got priorities.
Yeah,
there.
so he could go to like French Equatorial Africa, which it sounded like the moon to me.
Really?
And that's just where things went, And I just started hunting, and I really got really fascinated by big game, and took it from there. And then I with that was the fact that I came to know that I wanted to write.
Yeah.
That was like in my teens.
Wow.
And so that's where I kind of pointed myself towards writing. And just nobody could tell me better, apparently. And
yep.
So I started writing, and when I left school, I started trying to sell stories. Mm-hmm. But I was writing short stories and fiction, and they were coming back in due course, with coffee stains on them.
Back in the day when you actually got a rejection letter.
Well, you had to send a manuscript.
Yeah.
And like I say, they came back and they'd have cigarette ashes and coffee rings stuck on them where they'd been on somebody's desk.
Yeah.
We'd looked at it and then said throw it back. And then I decided, well, I wrote. Then I said, okay, let me try an outdoor story. So I wrote an outdoor story, and I sent it off to Gray's, and this was in the 70s. And the good thing was, it was gone for a long time. If I saw the envelope come back in 10 days or 2 weeks, I knew it was bad news.
Yep.
And they just hung on to it. And I finally wrote them a letter. I said, did you guys get this thing? And they said, oh, yeah, we're going to publish it. I said, what? And the funny part of that was, and I can remember this, I just come back from hunting in Colorado with my Dad's friend Roy. And we drove into town like at 4 a.m, and I was staying over at my folks' house. And I said, I can't knock on their door because they're not going to get up at 4 a.m. He said, well, I can stay here. And then his wife came and she said, oh, I heard from your mom. Said, you sold a story. And I said, what? and I went to bed, and I swear I just lay there all night just staring at the ceiling.
Oh, I bet. I bet.
And then basically didn't realize I was only going to make $700 that year.
Well, I'll tell you, back then, on a per-word basis, they probably paid more than we're getting these days. That's for sure.
Well, there was a golden age of magazine journalism. Like Robert Rourke would get $5,000.
Yeah.
So, he would go on safari, and he basically, at one point he would call a halt. It'd be on a 3-month hunt or something, and he'd call a halt, says, I got to take a day and a half, and he would sit down with his manual typewriter, and he would write up a dozen stories.
Yeah.
And then basically they'd airmail them back to New York to his publishers, to his syndicate.
Yeah.
Where they'd get, they'd run him in the newspapers, and he would just, take the money and keep going.
I've done the same thing on a much smaller scale, and so have you.
Yeah.
Your hunting bona fides are, to a lot of people, are heavy in the big game world, and we're going to talk more about that, and in the out of the United States to a large degree, and I really want to talk more about that. Yeah. But you are a bird hunter. We're sitting here on a hilltop near Sheridan, Wyoming, and there are sharptails within shooting distance of us, probably this moment.
Yeah. Well, there will be in a month or two.
Yeah,
they'll come back up here.
And your Cocker Spaniel Mickey that I met when he was a puppy, and gifted him this incredibly well-designed Scott Linden Signature Series collar. He's still wearing it.
Ching ching, ching ching.
But the bird hunting thing has always been a part of that.
Oh, sure. I mean, when I went to, it wasn't. Every time I've been to Africa now, a dozen or more times.
Yeah.
Which compared to somebody like Boddington is nothing.
Yeah,
he does that in a year. But poor guy. And but the first time I went to Kenya, which was interesting because you can't. That's all gone.
Back when you could go.
Well, it's all political now. I was really dying to go and do a bird hunt there now.
Yeah.
And there was an outfitter, and I finally got around to writing him, and he just said, "Oh no, they outlawed that." Two years ago.
Even bird hunting.
Even bird hunting. You cannot, as a tourist, you can't hunt birds.
Incredible.
But anyway, the first time I went to Africa I had just this, sand grouse.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. Yeah.
There are so many species over there that we wouldn't even know how to pronounce some of their names. But why don't you tell me a little bit about the bird hunting scene in Africa, if you can recall anything?
It's mostly, I think, from the African standpoint, it seems sort of, they want a bang for their buck. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Because they're going to hunt for the meat.
Yes.
And so the birds are really, they don't have a whole lot of. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of ammunition, expensive.
Yeah.
And so they kind of leave them alone.
Sure.
And also you don't have now, like in Argentina and Mexico, of course, you have these huge grain fields.
Yeah.
And so you have these flights of doves and quail that are just incredible. And I'm sure you've hunted perdis.
Not yet.
Oh, I've
had the opportunity.
That I think is the king of South American upland, because those birds are like, they look a little bit like a chucker.
Yes.
And they never get more than about 6 inches off the ground.
Yeah.
And they're a jet going right through the alfalfa. And
they're a relative of the ostrich or something, aren't they?
Tinamous.
Tinamous.
Yeah. And you hunt them with I hunted behind this German short hair. Good dog. And he looked like a damn snake.
Yeah.
He was down on his belly.
I bet.
Because they don't hold.
Yeah.
You never get a staunch point. They just have to keep snaking after them until they come up. And then they'll come up in ones and twos.
Yeah.
And then they'll fly low, so you got to make sure where you're pointing. And but they're that I think is, and there's a 8 birds is the end of the day. That's all. But you work to get those 8 birds, and
no
it's
doubt
fun.
about it.
It's fun.
Walking through that alfalfa period is a pain.
Yeah.
Almost literally. You take your magnesium afterwards,
Yeah,
and then you won't have the muscle cramps. In Africa, they've got francolins of various flavors.
They have well, sand grouse. It's hard to say. I'd say probably the most exciting bird hunting is for the sand grouse.
Yeah.
But that can be problematic because they really won't fly until after the sun goes down.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah. And I mean, I was hunting in Senegal along the Gambia River, and the birds would come in and they would drop down over the river, and you basically had to, against the background they were black. But you can look, I'd see the reflection in the river. Oh. And I would gauge it.
Oh, my God. That's way too much geometry.
Yeah. But then you drop one in, and these little kids would go over and jump into the river, and I'd be going, no, crocodiles, no. And they'd come out with the birds laughing and think it was just hilarious. And I found out later there are no crocodiles in that particular stretch of the river.
Well,
so
good. Yeah.
But there are hippos, so I don't know.
Well, a hippo could swallow them whole.
He would too. Yeah, they would too if they could.
Oh God!
But anyway, you have the green pigeon is one of the others, and then you get into like the guinea fowl, which is wonderful to hunt, but it's just one. You get one pass. Yeah. Basically, you'll have like a line of beaters, and they'll come through, and the guineas will flush over you, and you try to take both barrels and try to get 2. And then they just sail down, and once they hit the ground, they start running. And and they never stop. Yeah. But I love guinea fowl. It's delicious.
What you were saying last night that it's the best eaten bird you've ever found.
It was the best prepared, I think, because it was. I've had it a couple of times that when it, again, it was back in Kenya the first time, and the cook we had in the camp was just a wizard. Yeah. And he made curry. Oh, God. With guinea fowl. And, that was good.
That sounds real good.
It was really good.
For breakfast right about now.
Yeah.
Well, you're listening to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden. I'm here with Tom McIntyre. Look him up, M-C, big I-N-T-Y-R-E. Tom, if people want more information about you and what your output is these days, is there any place on the World Wide Web where they should go?
Well, I've never really put up a website. Yeah. But you can look on Amazon. Yeah. It has a lot of my background on there. Yeah. I still write. Sports Afield is still in existence.
Yes, it is.
And I write a column for that every issue. Wow. And hopefully let us hope that I will continue to do that. Great. I do. You wouldn't know it because I write a lot of TV. Yeah. And that's just, but that's the narration of the background. Yep. My main person for that, or my main outlet for that is The Hunt for Monster Bass, of all things. Oh, I'll be darned. But with Trevor Gowdy. Sure. Yeah, on the Outdoor Channel. Yep. And, anyway, and it's I always have to figure out how to describe a bass more interestingly every time. Well, I'm at the same point in some of my writing output in that I really work hard. I only write what I want to write, and so that makes it even harder sometimes. This because how do you come up with a different way to say that or that? I'll just say that it's been. I pretty much finished the book last summer. Yeah, Thunder Without Rain, and. 175,000 words. Oh my God! Yeah, with endnotes, and and then when I was done, it was after 5 years. I just kind of sat there and I go, "What next?" And it was like I don't know, and so basically right now all I'm doing is when I get assignments, I look forward to them because at least what did Dr. Johnson say about being hanged in the morning? It focuses the mind wonderfully, and when I get a deadline, it keeps me in focus, and I have an object and a goal, and I can work towards it.
Yeah. Yeah, there is some joy in that in and of itself, and we talked about that a little bit last night, and how, to have a finite beginning and a finite ending, unlike a book of 175,000 words, which will be with you the rest of your life in one way, shape, or form. Yeah. But you've written so much for so many publications over the years and so many books. What is it that keeps you going when it comes to writing about hunting?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's probably never was the best choice considering the climate of the times.
Yeah, you mean these times, or
these times?
Yeah,
it isn't looked upon.
Yeah.
But it ignores the fact that there's millions of hunters in this country alone. There's a huge hunting culture in France.
Yeah.
There's for their population, they have a huge percentage that are hunters. The Germans, all these people, the Italians, they hunt. And it's just amazing that they're still there. They're still, it's still a serious subject. It isn't a frivolous thing at all. And the trick is to write about it in a way that acknowledges the seriousness, but not to get sanctimonious about it, or not to get, apologetic about it.
Yeah, I'm not in Tom's league. You all know that because you've seen my stuff, and you hopefully will see Tom's if you haven't already. But there is I tell myself every time I turn on the computer not to lecture anybody.
Well, there's no reason to, and I always, if I'm going to make a point, I'm going to make a point that this is my point of view.
Yeah.
This is what you do is, within the bounds of law and regulation and ethics, even and morality, I guess.
Yep.
It's up to you.
Yep.
But I don't get hung up on, do I hunt with a recurve or do I hunt with a longbow? Do I, it's like, you can get in all these like little picky niceties, and it's really all about the spirit you bring to the hunt.
Well, that's a good way to put it, and that's, I think, becoming more and more dominant in the zeitgeist of hunting to at least a degree. There are a lot of people out there. Granted, there are the meat hunters, if you want to call it that, and I don't mean anything derogatory, but there are the folks who are now meat hunters because they want clean food, or whatever, and then there's other people who hunt for other reasons, but the spirit of that is I think bubbling a little bit closer to the top now. This idea of a more, I don't know what, a more transcendent. And I apologize.
No, that's fine. No,
transcendence. But
yeah, well, I mean, it is. It's you can at one time it wasn't a matter of choice.
Yeah,
it was just pure necessity. And it was. I mean, it started out with us stealing meat from lions, And then we decided that we would cut out the middleman and start doing it ourselves, We looked down and looked at our hands. I said, what are these, what's this fifth thing for on our hands? Oh, it's a thumb. And wait a minute, it's opposable,
and from there came a firearm.
Yeah, I mean, it took 500,000 years from a stone axe to a semi-auto shotgun, but but the subsistence thing is to me it's always been the purest part of the hunt. I mean, that is the one unassailable thing. And my friend John Bart, his wife Eileen Clark writes a lot of cooking books, and she was not a hunter when they met. And she's become a real, over the last, 20, 30 years, she's become an avid hunter.
Yeah.
And she's been asked by her friends, older friends, why do you do this hunting thing? And she goes, you ever try to stick a live deer in the oven?
Yeah, don't get me started. That whole rabbit hole, we could spend a week talking about that. Yeah.
How do you shoot those little feathery things?
Yeah.
Usually with number 7.5.
Yeah, it works pretty well most of it, although with me it, they're all out around. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Here you go.
Not to get too hoity-toity, but what is it for you that really, pardon the pun, trips your trigger about hunting?
You know, to quote another friend of mine, I have this really old, when we go back to high school, and he is no pun intended, as you say, he's a criminal lawyer, which means
yes. Well, let's just leave it there.
Who is it? Yeah, no, but no, he's a criminal lawyer, and so he just is always trying cases, and he has a funny line about and this will offend part of your audience, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But basically he said he did one civil case. He said I'm never going near those again.
Yeah, yeah.
And I go, why? Was it the defendant? It was the plaintiff? He goes, no, it was the lawyers.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd rather be in court with some guy. Yeah, he'd rather be defending a murderer. You know, frankly, because that's his job. And
it's cut and dried too.
Yeah. But he has been traveling with me to Africa, and Mexico and Canada and China for, since the 80s.
Wow.
And he gets that question. He'll be in a hunting camp somewhere, and they'll look around, they go, where's your gun? He said, well, I don't hunt. But what are you doing here? And he goes, well, it's like this. It's like hunters will always find the best places on earth before everybody else does. And that, to me, is a big thing, to think, I am in a place where few other people have ever been.
Yeah.
And to see that, and if I didn't hunt, I wouldn't see that country.
Yeah.
I wouldn't meet those people.
Yep.
And to me, that's part of it. But it's also, there is a strange relationship to the animal, and it's. I don't go out, like the Ortega y Gasset line about, I don't hunt to kill, I kill to hunt. Is in that, because by hunting an animal, I have to make myself part of his world.
Yeah.
Or its world, wherever you want. I have to make myself part of it. And if I try to go in there and think I'm going to dominate it and overrule it, as they say, or rule over it, it's failure. It's a failure. You can kill animals that way.
Sure.
But you can't really hunt them that way.
Well, so how do you become part of that world? I'm looking at, tomorrow I'll be in South Dakota.
Sure.
And,
which you just said like a South Dakotan.
Yeah. Don't you know? No, wait, that's a little farther north. But anyway, I'm there for that very reason. And it's all of those things you just described. But how does one become a part of that world?
Well, a lot of it, like in South Dakota, it's a generational thing. It is simple. There's people there who wouldn't, to them the idea that you don't hunt is foreign.
Yeah.
Because they look back at their generations of, all those old Model 12s and those plaid jackets, and it goes all the way back in their culture. They didn't have to think about it. They just grew up that way.
Yeah.
Now, for me, as I say, I came from a non-hunting family in Southern California, which was, and so basically the biggest thing I could hunt out there was I could chase deer around and never find any, but then, I could go out to the desert and hunt jackrabbits, or go someplace else and hunt cottontails. And I shoot a lot of doves and, and I have to admit I've shot a few put-and-take pheasants because the state used to just put them out. Just throw them out. And usually, like right opening day, they'd open the door and throw all the pheasants out, and all the guys would be waiting there and go over.
Just like the hatchery truck for trout.
Yeah. No, so, and, then after that, I just became, the result, the sensation or the effect left me wanting more.
Yeah.
That what I came to understand was, that, and I don't want to make this too heavy, but it's like Hemingway said that there was never a morning when he woke up in Africa that he wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And that's the way I feel when I'm out in the field, is I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'm not elated. I'm not giddy. I'm not overexcited, but it is that contentment and satisfaction that you don't find. I suppose people can find that. I'm sure they can find it in other things. You know, I mean, maybe it's riding a bicycle. I don't know.
You know, whatever floats your boat, as they say,
or on your boat.
Yeah. So it is, you know, it's a good way to put it. And I was just thinking about a discussion we had around a fire a couple weekends ago somewhere, and it was pretty much the same thing. It's, you know, like you said, it's not balls to the wall adrenaline rush all the time, although we hope for something.
Oh yeah, we want to. We'd live for the flush.
Yes,
as it were.
Yeah. But it's that feeling you have when you're on the top of the hill and you're looking down, and as you've said, and I'll look at and I'll think, you know, the last guy who was here dropped that arrowhead. Isn't that bitching? Yeah.
No, I mean, it's also, you know, what is the other attraction of hunting for me is that it really opens me up. And well, open is the word to begin with. It is the open, but it opens me up to the unexpected.
Yeah.
You know, that's the whole thing about hunting. It's if there were not the, I guess this is a word, the unexpectation of what happens out there.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm going to see when I go around the corner. I don't know. You know, I mean, it's the same, and even more so in fishing, let's say, because you'd never see it's all down under the water, and you don't know what you have until it surfaces.
Yeah.
But I'm looking for a deer, you know, and all of a sudden maybe I'll see one that's beyond my expectations, and that is in some place I never would have dreamed it would be.
Yeah.
But to get to that, you have to be there. You have to go out and be there.
Good point.
And by saying I'm going to go hunting, that opens that whole terrain to you, that internal terrain, that part of you that needs to be in the open, that needs to find the unexpected, that needs to be, you know, basically it's a matter of me being put in my place in every sense, in several senses of that word.
Not the punishment sense.
There's a bit of that,
really,
but it's well, I mean, you know, I look around, you know, you can look around here. You know, and we have the Bighorn Mountains over here, and you know, and then there's the prairie that goes all the way out to the Missouri River if you keep going, and you know, and it's like I'm just this little speck.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not. You know, you in a city you can feel like you're you know, the top of the heap. You know, but out here you're not.
We hunt quite often. Our chucker hunts are in what I belaborly. There's another coined word. Okay.
Yeah.
We got to write all these down.
Yeah.
But
well, they're on tape.
I tell everybody over and over again, we hunt in the darkest place in the lower 48 states. And if you want to realize what a speck you are, go to that place. Well,
and then I don't want to tell stories on my wife, but we moved up here from Southern California 28 years ago. Anyway, one night she walked outside, she came back in, she goes, there's a strange cloud in the sky. And I said, what do you mean? And she went out and she said, well, there, look at that cloud. It runs all the way across the sky. And I go, that's a galaxy. It's our galaxy. It's the Milky Way. And she grew up in the city and goes, oh, really?
Yeah.
Or there's time. I mean, we get the Northern Lights down here.
Wow.
And to see those are just spooky as hell.
It's humbling in ways. Yeah, it's physically humbling.
Yeah.
You know, that's a way to look at it.
Yeah.
And we're digging deep here, but I love this aspect of it. Let's take a moment here. We're going to keep talking with Thomas McIntyre here on the Upland Nation podcast about all things hunting. Talk about the new book in the works. We're going to get a preview of it before everybody else. And one reason I'm grateful to do that is Tom and I have worked over the years for the same outfits and run into each other back and forth. And then I'll never forget, Tom, one time I was up on stage at the Governor's Invitational Pheasant Hunt in South Dakota. I was the master of ceremonies. And I look across the room, and at the far back door, the light opens and in there, silhouetted, clearly wondering why he walked into this room, because it was the wrong room for you. There's Tom.
No. As a matter of fact, I knew you were over there, and I just decided, well, I'm a wedding crasher. What are they going to do? I think the meal's done.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to try to steal a meal, but I might as well go on over and
I love it.
See what else. I want to be able to critique Scott's performance.
Oh my God! Yeah, well, luckily I didn't debrief you after that.
Yeah,
what a wonderful time that was. That man.
Well, there's always. I mean, I envy you that you're going out to the Dakotas or South Dakota because. There's just nothing like it for ditch parrots.
Exactly. Yeah, in fact, that's another challenge we should put together, all the names for that bird. But we'll be back with all of that and talking in great detail about Thunder Without Rain, the new book coming up this spring, in just a moment. I hope you're enjoying this Tom McIntyre's final interview, which I am so grateful I was able to pull together on my last trip in that direction. Yeah, if you want to learn more about Tom, go to simonandschuster.com and then just search for his name. All of his books will come up there. The new one, Thunder Without Rain, comes out in February, so stand by for that. We'll be back to the rest of my interview with Tom in just a moment. First, sageandbreaker.com is where you find just about anything you need to keep your guns in good shape, from instruction on how to clean them the right way to the what we call consumables, the stuff you use. The CLP is one of those, to the gear that will help you clean and take care of your gun. It's all at sageandbreaker.com. Now's a good time to get on the mailing list because the rare sales that come up will be Well, you'll find out about them before everybody else. Same for new products. So get on the mailing list at sageandbreaker.com. Now let's get back to my interview with Tom McIntyre, author and good friend. No longer with us literally, but here in spirit and always will be. His legacy will live on as long as there are books in print or online. Welcome back to the Upland Nation podcast. Scott Linden here, enjoying the heck out of this. We could talk all day, but I don't think I have enough digital capacity in this board with Tom McIntyre.
I don't think I have enough cerebral capacity to do it anymore.
Well, I'm looking at that coffee mug. It's about as industrial strength a mug as you. Of course, it has to fit the whole map of Wyoming on it, which is one of the problems, I guess. But
there we are at the top.
Yeah, I love it, and it's funny because really you ought to be a part of Montana, But
don't get me started. Don't get me started.
But we're going to talk. Let's talk about a couple things. First off, let's start with, can you rattle off a list of most of the countries you've hunted in?
Well, I'm trying to think how many states I've hunted in, and I think there's probably only a few, maybe on the very few that I've never hunted in, including Hawaii.
Yeah.
Which is a great bird hunting place.
Absolutely.
Have you ever done that?
I've been down there with a gun, but I've never been able to shoot at anything living. I shot a lot of pigeons, but they were all made of clay.
Oh, yeah. Well, you go up on the Big Island is the Parker Ranch, and they have Franklin.
They do.
And they have
two kinds.
And they have doves and ducks and they have, you can't hunt them, but they have those stupid nene geese. I mean, no offense to the nene, but they're just like, they look around going like, huh?
You'll get a kick out of this. We were there on a vacation, and we were at the lip of one of the volcanoes, and I forgot it was Haleakala or the other one. I forgot. And we're looking down and walking up the inside of the volcano. It's dormant, so it's not, and you can hike through it. But walking up the edge, coming right to me is a chucker.
Well, there's a good chucker there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Big Island's got like 8 or 9 species of huntable birds.
Yeah, but to a great degree, you're known and you write quite often about Africa.
Yeah, that has also been. That goes all the way back to my first inkling.
Yeah,
with my father's friend and his African buffalo.
Yeah,
and that was another. If there's a triumvirate in my life, it would be hunting, writing in Africa.
Yeah.
Even though I love hunting everywhere else too. As far as countries go, well, let's see. I mentioned China.
Yeah.
I've hunted in Germany. I've hunted in Finland. I've hunted in Czechoslovakia. I've hunted in Ireland. I've hunted in Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah.
I've hunted on New Caledonia, which is an island out in the Pacific, sort of like in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it was a jumping off point for B-25s or something way back in the day.
It's where McHale's Navy went on liberty.
If you're too young to know what McHale's Navy is,
I shouldn't mention that.
No.
But and then of course Mexico. I've hunted in Argentina.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I've hunted anywhere else down there. No, I can't. I've fished some down in like Guatemala and other places.
Sidebar, Argentina, a lot of us who own shotguns are always told that's the place to go because you can shoot 1,000 rounds in a day at all those doves. Have you done that?
Yes, I have.
And would you do it again?
Yeah, I would do it. Honestly, I would do it for about a day and a half.
Yeah.
Because I've seen guys go down there and they will go through a case in the morning. I mean, literally, a case of shells in the morning and a case of shells in the evening.
Yeah.
Now, all those birds are picked up.
Yeah.
And they're cleaned and they're eaten.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to eat every one of those birds. They're not going to get knocked down.
Right.
Though they are considered a pest.
Yeah.
They're not considered a game bird.
No, they are basically poaching agricultural crops.
Yeah. And then the other one you get are those. They're really more fascinating if you don't hunt them, but they have these little green parrots. And those things are hugely destructive because they build these like massive stick nests. I mean, they're the size of a house. Wow. They're the size of your trailer.
Wow.
And they get up into like on water tanks, and they just engulf it.
Oh wow.
And so they have a problem with those guys. And but we hunted the pigeon hunting. There's really good. I mean, wild pigeon.
Yep.
And then the duck hunting is superb.
So I'm told.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's
it could be a holy grail for somebody.
Let's put it this way: if it's something it should be on your bucket list. I guess is the word I would use.
Yeah.
But that you get that first day of excitement of these like waves and waves and waves. I would just basically I wouldn't have to pick a shot. I would just wait till the bird fell into where I was gonna, and then I basically would I'd pull up on it, and then at the last second I would just sweep under it, and then boom, down it would come. And the guy just sitting there with a not a stopwatch, but one of those
those clicker things.
Yeah, those clicker things.
Counting birds.
Yeah, it's something you got. But and I don't have that much against doves to keep hunting them.
Yeah.
All that much, but it's fun for a day or two.
I bet. If you had to narrow it down to one bird to hunt, can you think of a one that's just presenting itself for all the reasons we've just talked about, from the spirit of the hunt to the place?
Yeah, well, and this is not wing shooting, but wild turkey.
Yeah.
Wild turkey it was just an amazing bird to hunt.
Yeah.
And the other one I would love to hunt is, I don't know why, I've always had this yen to go to India and hunt peacock.
Now that is weird. I mean, not you thinking it, but the idea of shooting one of those.
They're a big pheasant.
Yeah, they are.
That's all they are.
Yeah.
They fly.
Yes, they do.
And, I saw, you can go on YouTube and they have a huge feral population in New Zealand.
I'll be darned.
But that country is, it makes Everest look flat.
Yeah. Yeah.
You will note that all of the hunters are probably in their 20s or 30s because they're going down and down trying to flush these big long tail birds out of these crevices.
Well, there's a bucket list species for you.
Yeah,
everybody.
But I would like to do it on its native ground as a native, but that's not going to happen anymore.
No. Well, but what you have done already has ended up in print 1 million times, and I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there's 8 books there.
I wish it had been for $1 million.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah,
if you could finally get paid by the word for some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But the latest book, which you've really, it is your I don't know what to call it. Somebody else called it the memoir du. Who said that, by the way? Somebody I know?
Yeah, me.
Okay.
Yeah. That was the... it is a book of memoir. It's a memoir, and it's a history. It's a natural sciences.
Yeah.
And it was basically answering questions I had about the buffalo. Because the buffalo's always meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm going to go to Africa, I'm going to hunt buffalo.
Yeah.
And to me, it is. I don't want to kill a big cat.
Yeah.
I've done it, but I don't want to anymore.
Uh-huh.
Certainly don't want to kill a rhino.
Yeah.
You know, we saw when I was first in Kenya, there were lots of rhino.
Sure.
I mean, and the black rhino, not the white rhino. You know, white rhino is a rather sleepy, drowsy old fellow.
I'll be darned.
But they're still 6,000, 7,000 pounds.
Yeah.
With a horn.
Yeah.
Or two. And
pointy.
Pointy. Yeah, they have a pointy end. And but just seeing those black rhino were just. I remember I was hunting with John Fletcher's deceased now, and we get into the bush and. We're tracking buffalo, which the first time you go into dense bush after a buffalo, it's like, oh no.
Yeah, and what I mean, I guess there's one thing worse, and that would be a wounded buffalo.
Yes, that's part of the obligation. If you wound it, you got to go after it. But now we're in this thick cover, and we could hear the buffalo. We'd heard the buffalo go in, and we're trying to work our way around to see if we can find them, and. There was this kind of tea kettle whistling noise, and John looked over me and he said, "Look for a tree." And I said, "Well, I don't climb trees." He says,
yeah, you will.
He says, "You don't have to." But I said, "Well, what is it?" He goes, "It's a rhino." And I said, "What do you, huh?" And he said, "Find a tree. It could be just a sapling. It doesn't matter. And then hold on to it. And if the buffalo comes, he's gonna have to go right or left of the tree. So you time it so you go the opposite direction." And he'll go off about 10 yards and forget what he was doing.
I guess that's a rhino for you.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the buffalo, he embodies so many things for me. I mean, he's smart, he's tough, he likes to hide.
Yeah.
They say an elephant never forgets, a buffalo never forgets.
No, I've read in your books and in other places that they also can hold a grudge.
Well, yeah. There's one of the episodes in the book, and I'll come back to my train of thought there in a second. But was basically there was a guy who's a professional hunter. And he and his client, they'd taken a buffalo and they were loading the carcass up into the vehicle, and a second buffalo came out of nowhere. Yeah, and killed him. Oh wow! And it was probably. There's a name for these old solo buffalo, or they call them dagaboys. And dag is the word for mud.
I get it.
And basically
they're coated in.
There'll be 2, 3, 4 old buffalo, and they will basically dominate a water hole or a wallow, and they just roll in there and they coat themselves in mud to keep the insects off, and they get cool. And they'll all run together. They have been thrown out of the big herds. Yeah, the cows are really more dangerous than the bulls, just from a straight-on standpoint, because they are very protective of not only themselves and the herd, of course, and their babies. I mean, you can see they'll fight down lions, and that's good enough for me. Yeah, but so as I was saying, the book, my impetus for writing the book. Was I had all these questions about buffalo. Yeah. And I had never seen them answered. And I didn't know what. And I wanted to find out, I wanted to do my own work on it. And I did. And I mean, for instance, you'll hear in passing reference about the great rinderpest plague at the turn of the 20th century. Now, rinderpest was a horrible disease of cattle. Okay. Not humans. All right. Yeah. But its effect was to kill off all the cattle, and people starved to death. Okay. And when it got to Africa, about 1889 or something like that, came in through off the Red Sea with Italian troops. Well, not them necessarily, but they had imported a lot of Indian cattle for food. Yeah. And they brought rinderpest with them. Mm-hmm. Now, rinderpest is simply measles. Oh. You know, if you had the measles, you've had a cousin of rinderpest.
Okay.
And it causes salivation, weight loss, vomiting, you know, diarrhea. It's just, you know, it's terrible. And it will, sometimes it'll take a week to kill. Sometimes it'll kill overnight. And when that hit Africa, it spread down. It moved. You could chart it as it moved south.
Yeah.
And it got into the wild herds, and there was many species that it got into. Buffalo was the hardest hit. There were no buffalo by the turn of the 20th century.
Wow.
I mean, they were down. I mean, people would talk about where they'd seen thousands of Cape buffalo. They now saw maybe 15. Mm-hmm. You know, and there were more skeletons on the ground than there were buffalo walking around.
Yeah.
And so I was very interested in that, so I did that, and that led me to, and then I would get to. This is why I had to put in endnotes, because I just couldn't cram everything, you know. Otherwise, the reader would be like, you know, trying to strangle me.
Yeah.
But when I realized that you could chart it as it moves south, but it also moves south coincidentally with the modest uprising in the Sudan, which was, and then you get into China Gordon and the British and Winston Churchill, who was at the charge of Omdurman that ended the Mahdi uprising. And so I just said, well, people don't know what that is, so I had to do a whole endnote talking about the Mahdi uprising. But it was like something that would come along. I mean, like, well, how long does a buffalo live? You know, what are their horns? How do they grow their horns? You know, who are their ancestors? Where do they come from? And, you know, that took me back 20 million years and working my way up. Yeah. But the interesting thing to me has I looked at you can look at a map of the dispersal of the buffalo. Mm-hmm. They came out of Central Africa, is where their native species, the original species, were. Yeah. And then they spread to the west into the jungles or the rainforests, and that you have the dwarf red buffalo. But then the big Cape buffalo in various subspecies started going east, and then they started going south, and of course they went all the way down to the Cape in time.
Sure.
Parallel to them, you can see the human migration from the same Central African starting point to the same following next to the buffalo, all the way down to the end in the terminus of Africa. Which is where the what we call the Bushmen, or actually they're the Khoisan. Okay. Which are the oldest. I hate to say race or breed, but they're the oldest human beings on Earth. They went south with the buffalo, and the other part of the Bantu people, or their ancestors, they all went out to the east, and they crossed over into the Middle East, and then they fanned up into Europe and all the way down through Southeast Asia, and eventually they came across the land bridge. And Native Americans are part of that subspecies of humans, if you want. Okay. And meanwhile, the Bushmen or the Khoisan are all down at the south, and they have not had any contact with these other people. They have not, they are their own people. Yeah. And they didn't see it. It was until the late 1400s or early 1500s when the Portuguese landed on the Cape, and the first Portuguese came on shore, and he went over and he shook hands with a Khoisan, and he was shaking hands with a human being, for the same human being that he had been 150,000 years before.
You know, this kind of stuff fascinates me because I could easily have become a history professor or an archaeologist. You're doing the same thing, Tom.
You look great in that Indiana Jones hat.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And if I could only learn how to work a bullwhip right.
Oh, I've heard stories.
If you're listening to the Upland Nation podcast, we're talking about the uplands of Africa right now with Tom McIntyre. His new book, not yet out, Thunder Without Rain. You call it a memoir with dangerous game, God's Cattle, the African Buffalo. It's a fascinating insight. And I'm thinking, while you were just making that description of what I'll loosely call evolution, of the people out of Africa. I'm thinking of another author who many people will recognize his name, Datus Proper, and you might have met Datus.
Oh, I know Datus.
Yeah,
He's passed away, but
he's gone now. But he wrote a book that touched on the same basic idea to a degree of, why am I doing this? What do I really want to know? Is there something more to it than just a tailgate picture at the end of the day? Yeah. You've talked to people all over the world about, and people like me. Do you think most of us are motivated by those kind of more bigger questions, whether it's pheasants, chuckers, or capes?
Well, I would like to think so. I think we all have questions.
Yeah.
I think in many instances they're not formed.
Yeah.
But they're there. Mm-hmm. They're maybe not deliberate search for the answer.
Yeah.
Which also may be the fact there really is no answer.
Yeah.
There's just the way it is. It's the way it is.
Well,
but that's what I did. I basically wrote the book with all the questions in my own mind, and in an effort to answer them.
Did you write the questions down first, or
they
came up as you wrote?
Yeah, I had an outline, and it was a strange genesis. I was doing a podcast of another person up in Bozeman, Montana, and it's in 2017, and we were visiting some friends and traveling around a little bit. And I walked out of the podcast, and I was thinking, I should write a book about buffalo. I mean, I remember exactly where I was standing when it came to me. Yeah. And it wasn't going to be 5 years. It was going to be 6 months. And I have the book done. Yeah. Well, it didn't work that way. And and then since I finished the book, I've made literally, my editor hates me, but I've literally gone through and made 6,000, 7,000 changes.
Well, he deserves the extra work. By the way, everybody, Tom is also the reason I was able to be published at Skyhorse Publishing, and we still officially, I guess, share an editor over there. Yeah, well,
Jake is, and we'll name him. So, but it's your show, so you'll get the lawsuit.
Yeah.
No, Jay's a great guy, but he's pretty much retired now.
I think I caused that.
But he stayed on. He stayed on to finish my book with me.
Yeah.
So I really have to give him a lot of credit for that.
Oh, yeah, and I have to give you a lot of credit for basically reintroducing me to Jay after he left Field and Stream or Outdoor Life, whichever it was.
Well, they were just, everybody got,
Well, that's another podcast.
There was a bloodbath.
Yeah, there was.
He had to get out of there.
Yeah, but he got out and he went over to Skyhorse, and you introduced me to him, and all of a sudden I had a deal.
Oh, good.
Well, I'm grateful for that.
Well, of course, there might be more headaches than you thought.
Well, it always is, but that's true of everything. But that's why I asked that question about asking the questions. A lot of us, Thelonious Monk.
There you go.
Now there's an obscure reference. Once said...
Maynard G. Krebs' favorite musician.
Well, why am I not surprised?
Nobody knows what the hell we're talking about.
I'll have to put all those names and links in the show notes, but Thelonious said something like, the cats I like best are the cats who take chances. Sometimes I play a song I've never heard before. And you sat down at the keyboard on day one of Thunder Without Rain and started playing a song you'd never played before.
Well, yeah, my other books, for the most part, have been collections of stories, because you try to get a double header out of everything.
Yep.
You don't want to waste it. You want to try to get some more money out of it.
Yeah.
Frankly, that's the part of the game people don't ever talk about. But they do it. They just complain about it. And as I wrote the book, it just one thing led to another. I said, well, okay, so what about? I had to do a whole thing on. I was going to do a in-depth explanation of C3 and C4 grasses. Now C3 grasses are, I think it's like they're tropical.
Okay.
And they evolved back in when the Earth was much more, the humidity was much higher.
Okay.
But then it started to drop, humidity, and they produced three 3 carbon atoms, which is why they're C3s.
Okay.
And then C4 grasses came along. And that is where you see your classic prairie grasses.
Yeah.
You look out, and, and I think I said the one was, oh yeah, actually it's the other way around. Anyway, but the C, you can say, if you want to think of the C3, now maybe I'll get this backwards, but you can think of the C3 as Scotch, and you can think of the C4 as rum.
Okay. All right. I like the analogy.
Yeah, and basically that is what drew, the buffalo came out of Asia and went over to Africa, and they were drawn in by these big savannas. These savannas appeared.
Yeah.
And in the same time as the savannas spread, the forest shrunk, and we climbed down out of the trees, and started walking around upright. Mm-hmm. About the same time the buffalo were showing up. And we really evolved together, which is something I found in writing the book, the connection.
Fascinating. What do you think, what do you want people to take away from this book when they're done with it?
Well, I really want it to be where, I think we talked about this, I believe, that I want it to be, I want to be of service to the reader.
Yeah.
My basically, I would look at a sentence that I had initially written, and I would say, oh, that's clever, that's well done. And then I would look at it again, I go, that doesn't make any sense. Because I suddenly I thought of myself as a reader who comes along and he sees a sentence and it looks like a Jenga pile, and he's got to figure out how to pull the stuff out so it doesn't.
Yeah.
And so I just went back and I said, okay, style be damned. I'm going to make it as readable, and that's all I've striven for in the book, is just to make sure it's readable, and funny and, and I hope moving in some ways.
Yeah.
But the other thing I was getting at was like, I called it, I made up a name for it, the Memoir d'Ur.
Yeah.
Because that was from the writer Simenon, who wrote George Simenon, I think. Well, he wrote the great mystery stories.
Oh, okay. All
but right. when he would, and he was a funny dude in lots of ways. But anyway, he would sit down and in 7 days write a book, and then he would not write again for another 6 months. Then he would sit down and write a book.
Yeah.
And he had never spent more than a week.
Wow.
On them. But in between his mystery stories, he also wrote what he called roman d'Ur, which were just these dark kind of noir, without his detective character.
Uh-huh.
And he would write them. And so I was thinking about my animus towards modern memoirs, that they are about, a lot of them are, unfortunately, are about victimhood.
Sure.
About identity.
Yep.
And I'm...
Yep. Oppression,
trauma. Trauma. And I'm just I'm going well, okay. Though there is some of that in my book, I can't deny it. There is a kind of a subplot, if you were, for a nonfiction book. But I just didn't want that.
Yeah.
And I thought back, what are the autobiographies or memoirs that I really like? And I thought of Harry Cruz's Childhood, which is a book about him up to age 6. And it's and he grew up in the Depression in Georgia, and and it's an incredible story, but he doesn't sentimentalize it.
Yeah.
And you can think of other people. I'm trying to think. There's another one I had in mind. I can't remember right offhand. But anyway, that to me, I think was a memoir d'Ur.
Yeah.
Which I decided, okay, I'm going to coin a phrase.
I like it. Well, the book is called Thunder Without Rain. Keep your eyes peeled for it. Thomas McIntyre is the author. It'll be available from Skyhorse Publishing, and as they trained me so well, available anywhere books are sold, but not for a while. So stand by, and I'll do my best to make sure everybody hears about it when it's available.
You'll hear from me. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Don't you worry your pretty little head.
All right. So Tom, you've hunted for a long time in many exotic places and many slightly more mundane places.
Yeah.
To our audience of bird hunters who are just looking to have a good time out there next weekend on the prairie somewhere, what kind of advice would you have for a guy like me?
Well, I think do your homework.
Yeah.
And I think you impress that upon people.
Yeah.
I noticed on your website you make it clear that, okay, I'm not going to give you a GPS location. Which was funny because years ago my editor said, well, when you go hunting, I want you to tell me which trailhead, and I said no. I'd like to go on living.
Yes.
I'm not going to tell you where the big elk are. It's up to you. And but yeah, no, I mean, I think you got to put some effort into it.
Yeah.
Like I have a spot down here. I haven't hunted in a couple of years, but when I get every once in a while, I want to go shoot a sage grouse.
Yeah.
And I just get in the car and drive down there.
Yeah.
And I take along this little black dog with me. And that's a funny story because I put up this flock and I dropped this bird right into the middle of a sagebrush. And I knew it was in there, it didn't come out.
Yeah.
But it was flapping going down. And so we circled it. And I couldn't see anything in there.
No.
And all of a sudden, he looks up, and like the wind is right. And he does this, like, those foxes when they dive into the snow to catch
on every National Geographic special.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's what he did.
I love it.
And he came out, and he had this bird pinioned by the wings.
Oh, gosh.
And then I said, okay, bring it over here. He wasn't going to bring it over.
Nope.
But at the same time, he ran all the way back to the car and just lay there and laid on it.
Yeah.
So I just said, okay, I'm not going to punish you for that.
No. That first off, that grouse is almost as big as him. Second off, he deserves a victory lap after a performance like that. And I'll never fault a dog for anything like that.
No, I mean, he wasn't keeping it away from me. He was just going to go back and, it's mine.
Yeah, exactly.
But
you're a good boy.
I think he likes. But anyway, that is something, I found out about that by word of mouth. Then I got out the map and I looked at the map and I figured out how to get there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you need. You need to, you look for some inside information. There's a magpie out there. Anyway, they, and then, go on it.
Yeah.
You were talking about what were you talking about in Dakotas, the grasslands out there?
Yeah.
And hunting, and then you hunted, I've hunted horseback for them too. And that's a lot of fun.
It is, but you got to put in the miles. But that's not to say people can't help. There's a difference between hot spotting and telling somebody, you ought to go to that area code on that side of that mountain range.
No.
And finally, because you have traveled so much and you've hunted so many species in so many places, what is something that you always take on a hunt that we may not have thought about?
Well, probably several things. One, I always take a good book.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, because there's downtime.
Yeah.
And I don't mean in the field, but you can end up in airports. You can end up.
Yep.
So have a good book.
Uh-huh.
And I always take a notebook and pen.
Yeah.
And even if you're not a quote unquote writer, write down your thoughts.
Yeah.
Because they're hard to keep up.
Yep.
You'll go back some years later. And then curiously, I'm indifferent to photographs.
Yeah.
I take some, but I'm kind of indifferent to them. I think it's really, as you well know, I'm sure, it's really hard to hunt and take photographs by yourself.
The pros will say you can choose one or the other.
One or the other, but you can't do both.
Yep.
And I'm trying to think what else is depends how you're traveling too. If you're traveling by air, you're traveling by vehicle.
Yeah.
Have a good pillow. And the other thing too is just for heaven's sake, make sure your boots are broken in.
Yeah.
And good.
Yeah.
They don't, because there's nothing worse to come home and find a big blister, and then it just gets worse and worse.
Well,
and
there
worse.
is one thing worse, and that is being at the top of the chucker hill on your very first chucker hunt and having the boot come loose from its sole halfway down the slope.
Are we referring to a historical incident?
Yes, we are. Yes. And
and the other thing about chucker was I always figured out chucker hunting involved the chucker flying down, you walking down, they're flying up.
Yeah.
And you get to zigzag up and down from the bottom to the top all day long.
Well, you're absolutely right. And if this was television, I'd have a great joke for you, but I'll tell it to you later. Once again, that's Thomas McIntyre. Thunder Without Rain is the name of the new book. It's coming out from Skyhorse Publishing. Looking forward to seeing the whole book.
And your special guest is Mickey.
Yes, Mickey's been. If you heard a clunk, it was Mickey dropping his bone on the floor. I'm going to blame every incidental noise we've had on this pretty little guy. All black Cocker Spaniel with a whole tail and some Gordon Setter Brown in some of those leading and trailing edges of his feet and his legs. He's a good little guy, and the last time I saw him, he was about 9 months old.
Yeah, trying to run away.
Yeah, he was.
Trying to run into traffic.
Yeah, let's not even talk about that. But Tom, it's always fun. We'll talk to you again when the book comes out.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for being such a kind host. Thank you, Elaine, if you can hear me, or you will when we broadcast this, for your hospitality. Hey, we got a little bit more.
Don't tell my wife about Elaine.
We got a lot more to talk about on the Upland Nation podcast, so don't go away. But Tom, thank you. Great to have you.
It was a pleasure, and glad you could come by last night and have dinner with us, and safe travels on the road.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you again, Tom, for being Tom. I hope everybody enjoyed that interview. More to come in just a moment, including your own summary of who won on opening weekend. But first, we are brought to you in part by Pointer Shotguns, a work of art at a price that's a thing of beauty. Lots of great success stories coming from pointershotguns.com. Take a look at the new website. They've got all their models there, the target guns, the youth guns, the field guns, you name it, it's there, as well as some of my videos and articles. So if you're looking, in fact, one of them that I really enjoyed and apparently is getting a lot of great response has to do with safety and how your dogs play such an important part in that. So head over to pointershotguns.com and watch the videos, read some of the articles, and stand by for news on a new side-by-side shotgun, all at pointershotguns.com. Well, I love hearing from you, especially when we have a little fun talking about the stuff that you've done out in the field recently. And I asked on our social media a while back, and finally getting around to sharing it with everybody, who won on opening weekend? You know what I mean. You know, you sit back there at the end of the day, the end of the weekend, you're driving home and you're wondering, well, what was that all about? You know, sometimes you're scratching your head, aren't you? Well, when I asked it recently on social media and then also in our Upland Nation newsletter, got some fascinating results. Of all the participants, number one on the list, the winner, 48% say the dogs won. And that's a good thing, right? Yeah, sure it is. 28.5% said the birds beat everybody on that one, and I know how you feel about that. We humans, we won about 10% of the time. Terrain, weather, the rotation of the earth, bad juju, or a truck breakdown, 7% of us. And this is the one I like most, and I'm glad you were so honest with it. You know who won most of the time? Those other guys in that camp over there. You know the feeling, don't you? Absolutely. Well, better luck next time. There's only one opening weekend every season, but there's weekends all season. So get out and see if you can beat the odds this time around. The Upland Nation podcast is brought to you by TrulockChokes.com, TRULOCK, chokes.com. Talk about resources. These guys understand the value of high-quality choke tubes. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If you want to improve your shooting overnight, buy some high-quality, well-engineered, made with the right materials, choke tubes. That'll square away your pattern. Your pattern is critical when you're shooting at wild birds. Even if you don't pattern your own gun, look at their examples. All sorts of deals there, free choke tube case, free shipping, 10% off depending on how you order your gear. It's all available at TrulockChokes.com. Now it's time to say goodbye. A final goodbye to Tom McIntyre. Thank you for everything and the gifts you left behind for the rest of us. Again, if you want to learn more about Tom and particularly his new book, Thunder Without Rain, just go to simonandschuster.com and stay in touch there. It comes out in February. Tom was a mentor to me in many ways. He helped me get one of my book deals pulled together. I will never forget that, my friend. And if you have a friend out there who may or may not be in the twilight of their years, now is the time to reach out to them. Take them hunting. Show off your dog. That's what FurFeathersFriends is all about. Appreciate all of you who comment at the social platforms, who take the surveys on the Upland Nation newsletter. Appreciate those who leave ratings and reviews. We're all made possible by Sage and Breaker Gun Care products, Pointer shotguns, Mid-Valley clays, and Trulock chokes. I'm Scott Linden. Thanks for listening. Take a friend hunting. See you in the field.